All right, Jabbo, say good morning. Let us begin. So we are starting. Good. Thank you. So we are continuing this morning in Os Mem Ches in Tzidkas Hatzaddik. So also, if you remember again, the Rebbe really introduced to us this incredible idea of lo yischaber im rishoyim, that as much as we said in Os Mem Zayin, that every midah, even negative ones, and every character traits, even negative ones, could be used for good. When it comes to creating connections with the wicked, one must distance themselves. That one must be very careful about connection with a rasha, because that connection, and again, how remember who's a rasha, how you define a rasha, so that we're not exactly getting into, because that becomes even a little bit more complicated. But one of the things that we did see is that even someone who may have good intentions, but the actualization of those intentions is through something negative or illicit, ultimately again has the status of a rasha as well, and really needs to be avoided. That was the example of Yosef and the wife of Potiphar. But the Rebbe ends off really by saying something quite fascinating. The Gam Yehuda, we're on page Kuf Tes Vav, in the Be'urei HaChasidus, the left-hand column. So the Rebbe writes as follows. He says, the fact that Yosef would not have a relationship with Eshes Potiphar, even though again the Rebbe stated this idea that she saw, and even he saw, some potential that this was the quote-unquote the will of God, that there be a child or children from a union between Yosef and a woman from the home of Potiphar. The only question was it the wife of Potiphar? Was it the daughter of Potiphar? And yet Yosef really would not have any part of it, right? Would not engage in this behavior, because he felt ultimately again that the wife of Potiphar was a rasha, and therefore again he just could not engage her. So interestingly enough, he writes as follows. He says, Shari imlokein eze chilik vehevdel yesh bein hamaisa shel Yosef ve'eshes Potiphar lamaisa shel Yehuda v'Tamar. So here the Rebbe points out something very fascinating. He says, what about the story of Yehuda and Tamar? And the story of Yehuda and Tamar is a very strange story when you read it, right? Yehuda, thinking that Tamar was a harlot, ultimately again pays her for her services. She becomes pregnant. Now she becomes pregnant with twins, right? And those twins ultimately again become the future destiny of Klal Yisrael, right? Peretz and Zarach really become the source from which Davidic monarchy, Mashiach, ultimately comes. So that was also, I mean, if you look at that now again, what was that? Was that an illicit act? Not really. In other words, remember again, Yehuda wasn't married, Tamar wasn't married. In fact, the Gemara points out that he asked her a whole series of questions before having relations with her. But even if it's not quote-unquote halachically illegal, it certainly seems like a strange story. See, here you have Yosef abstaining from a relationship that he felt was inappropriate, Yehuda engaging in a relationship that kind of just raises our eyebrows as we read it. How do we distinguish? But to take it further, Yosef wouldn't engage in a relationship because, like the Rebbe says, lo yischaber im rishoyim. But isn't the act of having relations with a harlot, by definition, one of connecting with the wicked? Okay, it's fine. It turned out to be Tamar. And obviously, again, there was the Yad Hashem, the hand of God, was manifest in that encounter. But still, when Yehuda is thinking about the decision, doesn't he, like Yosef, have to be careful with connection with the rasha? So the Rebbe says something amazing. He goes on, he says, V'apapi kain yotza mimenu mimaisa zemelochim malchus beis David uneviim. So remember again, from Peretz and Zarach comes Davidic monarchy, and also great prophets like the prophet Yeshayahu. V'hayos nus api Hashem api ratzon Hashem yisbarach mamish. Kimo shamar v'sinu zal. Al Masham Yehuda Tzad Kamimeni. He goes on. Ve'eich Yada Elish Yatzas Abaskol VaAmra Mimeni Yatsu Kivushim. So the Rebbe goes, mitzvah. I'm just going to read a couple lines and then we'll explain. So remember again, not only that, but as Tamar is about to be executed for her act of immorality, and remember, she is not going to disclose the identity of the father of her children. She will not embarrass Yehuda. But Yehuda then realizes what happens, and he says the words tzadka mimeni. Ultimately, again, she is more righteous, she is wiser than I. In fact, the Gemara says that a baskol, a heavenly voice, comes out and said, Tzadka, after Yehuda said she is righteous, the Ribono Shel Olam said, Mimeni. these circumstances have come about because of me. So you see that the Ribono Shel Olam himself was involved in these circumstances. So asks Reb Tzaddik, Ve'im kein, yesh lahavin, lama nimna Yosef milishmo la'ishes Potifar, achari shera es kol hashoshelas hakidusha hamadas la'atzeis mahem. So let's go back for just a second. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, all of these circumstances were from me. They were all from me. So I don't understand. Going back before to the Yosef story, Eshes Potifar sees that there is to be a union between what she thought was her and Yosef. Even Yosef sees that there is some connection between a woman from Potiphar's house and him, which will produce offspring. So what I don't understand. Meaning, it's even if you think about it to a certain degree, isn't it even a stronger case to be made than the Yehuda and Tamar story, right? When Yehuda has relations with Tamar, he has no idea that God is in the picture over here. He has no idea about the wheels that are turning, right? Yehuda is coming off the loss of his wife, right? Looking, so he finds, so again, afterwards you see it was God. Yosef at least has some type of prophetic, what is the right word, like inclination that this is supposed to be a union, and yet he doesn't go through with anything. How do you understand it? Lama nimna Yosef milishma ishes Potifar. So we'll say herein lies the fundamental distinction. Shetamar Kufta Zayin, sorry. Shetamar haisat tzadekes. Tamar was righteous. Tamar was righteous. Ad shemasra nafsha shelo legalos al Yehuda. V'sivava min hashemaim sheyischabru hatzaddikim hatzadekes kedei lahamid mehem es malchus beis David v'hamashiach. V'ulam zu eshes Potifar haisu sof rashas k'mavur memedrash lachin l'ratzel yos imas. This is actually an incredible yisod. The Tzaddik says, you know what the difference is? The difference is in the moral character of the moral. I'll call it the moral fiber of the characters. That the difference was Eshes Potifar was a Rasha. Right? She was wicked. I will say now. Remember, there might be a prophecy. Maybe she saw something prophetically, but at the end of the day, what she was looking to do was to engage in an act of immorality. What she was looking to engage in an act of adultery. Now I will say. Now remember again. Adultery is not just forbidden for Jews, right? Adultery, or a code of morality, is one of the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, is one of the cornerstones of a moral society that every single human being is bound by. So Reb Tzaddik wants to make an amazing distinction. Tamar, whose intentions were righteous and whose character was righteous, ultimately, again, even through a series of kind of strange events, is able to produce a magnificently holy result. But Eshes Potifar, ultimately, again, who may have been driven by some type of what she perceived to be divine message, but the mechanism through which she sought to bring about the actualization of that message was inappropriate. Therefore, again, that's rishus, that's evil, and therefore nothing good comes out of it. In other words, what Reb Tzaddik is saying is like this, Rabbi saying, this is an incredibly important idea on a simple level. The ends don't justify the means. At the end of the day, sometimes in life you have to do uncomfortable things in order to bring about great results. But the moment that you have to become a Rasha to do so is the moment that your cause is no longer a worthy one. Let's see, you hear this distinction? We all have to do, not we all, but sometimes in life we have to do uncomfortable things to bring about certain results. But the moment you have to do something that makes you a Rasha is the moment that the goal you are pursuing is no longer noble. Tamar has to do something uncomfortable. I mean, I would imagine ridiculously uncomfortable, right? Tamar was, remember again, Tamar was a young woman. She was a young woman, widowed twice, because of the actions of her husband, not because of her. And yet, she doesn't say anything. She can't say anything. What is she going to say? What is she going to say? She's going to talk about the sons of Yehuda like this? A father-in-law who thinks that she's mamish like the Black Widow, right? That thinks that she just, there's no way I'm marrying off this girl to anyone else from my family. She has to do something uncomfortable, but yet while maintaining her righteousness. Eshes Potifar has to do something uncomfortable, but ultimately, again, illegal and immoral. And the moment that you have to become a Rasha in the pursuit of the actualization of your goal is the moment that the goal is no longer worthy and no longer appropriate. So Rabbi says that's why the stories, although there's so much connection, there's a difference in the moral character of the two primary characters, of the two primary individuals, Tamar versus Eshes Potiphar, both motivated by a vision that there needs to be a child with this particular individual. Tamar, uncomfortable circumstances, but not illegal. Eshes Potiphar, illegal circumstances. She becomes a Rasha. The moment she becomes a Rasha, the actualization of the goal is no longer noble or worth acquiring. Well, it's such an incredible yesod in life, and what an important lesson. Because how many times, okay, not like Tamar or Eshes Potiphar, but how many times in life do we have things we need to accomplish, and the only ability to accomplish them requires us sometimes to do things which are uncomfortable. A difference between uncomfortable and illicit. A difference between uncomfortable and illegal. A difference between uncomfortable and inappropriate. Do you have to go out of your comfort zone to accomplish great things? Sometimes yes. But the moment that you have to make yourself into a Rasha is the moment you have to stop and realize that this is not a goal worthy of pursuing. All right, we'll stop over here. We'll pick up Emir Hashem with Mem Test tomorrow.